This podcast is produced by the Idaho Psychedelic Society, an organization committed to fostering thoughtful dialogue around the emerging field of psychedelics. Views expressed by our guests are their own and do not reflect those of IPS, the podcast host, or its producers. This content is for informational purposes only and is not intended as medical, legal, or therapeutic advice. Psychedelics remain illegal in many states, and listeners are encouraged to comply with local, state, and federal laws. In a field often misunderstood, we are dedicated to fostering awareness, education, and ethical research on the healing potential that psychedelics hold. Please consult your own trusted healthcare providers or legal experts when making any decisions related to psychedelic use.
Hello and welcome to the Future Reimagined podcast. Our guest today I'm really excited to talk to is Matt Zemon. Matt is an author and psychedelic educator, author of several best-selling books on psychedelics, including The Beginner's Guide to Psychedelics, Psychedelics for Everyone, Beyond the Trip, several preparation and integration guides, including most recently The Veteran's Guide to Psychedelics, which I love that you included a manual there for coaches and therapists as well. I think that's really amazing. Matt also has a TED Talk out with the title of Psychedelics Are Catalysts, Not Cures. And so excited to have you here today, Matt. How are you doing?
Danny, I'm doing great. I've been looking forward to this. I really love what you're doing out there. I mean, between the society and the way you're spreading just good information without saying anyone needs to do anything. You're helping people be better informed and make better decisions for them. And I just appreciate the work you do in the world.
Oh, well, thank you so much for saying that. And we so appreciate the work you're doing out in the world too. And before we really delve into the meat of the topic of our conversation, which I'd really love to focus on veterans advocacy and your most recent book about helping veterans receive healing services through psychedelics, I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit about your backstory and how you kind of got into the world of psychedelics. Like, what was your jumping off point?
You know, it's such a funny question now to get asked that because I spend so much time talking about what are the quote best practices for having a psychedelic or entheogenic experience. And the reality is I didn't do any of it correctly back in the day. I had some friends who had hired a guide to do a guided magic mushroom journey. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And they're like, no, you do. It's going to be amazing. You're going to learn about yourself. You like to travel. You like to study. This is going to be great. And I agreed. And it was just it was not in my normal things to do. I was not a drug user. I didn't even drink that much. And then I went in not doing a lot of preparation, really underestimating. I thought about cool visuals and I was just wrong. And that first experience was genuinely transformative. I reconnected with my mom who died when I was 22 and she was 49. I realized, oh my gosh, I feel so safe and loved. And then, oh my God, I don't feel this level of safety and love in my everyday life. Why not? What's going on? And just insight after insight after insight. And I left that first experience thinking, I didn't know any of this existed. I didn't know I could feel this way. I didn't believe I was a spiritual creature having a human experience. Now I know that, and I need to know more. So I went back to school and got a first on the science side because that's where my in my head logical mind went. I've got to understand the science, and got a master's in psychology and neuroscience and mental health, and then on the ministry side. And now I'm getting a doctorate. I'll finish my doctorate in ministry this semester and in entheogenic studies. So in the use of psychedelics in spiritual purposes, which is how they've been used for thousands and thousands of years. But I just didn't know this world existed. And then now that I do, I can't imagine not spending my time thinking about having a spiritual life.
Yeah, it's amazing how transformative that first experience can be, really stepping into a new way of seeing and a new way of perceiving yourself as a spiritual being, like you said. So what was that like? Like, I'm just wondering if people who are psychedelic curious, who maybe have not used psychedelics, you mentioned you didn't necessarily do all the proper preparation or enough preparation to get you ready for that experience. Can you describe from just your personal story what that was like to experience a new realm of consciousness for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize that I literally might think I died in a journey, and I did. I thought I was done. I thought I didn't say goodbye to my wife and my children. I had this incredible sadness about, wow, I've left them behind. And And I had the gift of, oh my God, I'm still alive. Oh my God, I get to breathe. Oh my God, how amazing is this? That of the trillion and trillions of accidents that had to happen for me to get to be alive right now in this moment right here. Um, and when we do look at research, when we do look at what Johns Hopkins says, and why are different schools allowed to study with psychedelics on humans is if we pay attention to source, to set, and to setting, the relative risk is low. Now, I'm not saying these are safe, but I'm saying the relative risk for these substances are low, and that humans can engage with them as they have, um, at a reasonable level of risk for many people. Not for everybody, but for many people. So I guess if I could have it any way I want, I would spend more time asking myself, like, why am I doing this now? What's coming up for me to have this experience? Why am I choosing to use psychedelics versus meditation versus fasting versus dark caves versus running versus yoga versus whatever other tradition? Why am I? What are my intentions? And I would have spent more time thinking about those things, and then I would have had prepared, how am I going to unpack this when it's over? Who can I trust to support me? Do I have a community? Do I have a coach? Do I have a therapist? Do I have a priest? Do I have a rabbi? Somebody who can help me unpack whatever it is that I see in this experience. And I didn't prepare that in advance, and that would be a best practice to have. If I could script it for anybody, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, you really speak to sandwiching the journey with proper preparation and proper integration. And as you're sharing, I started using plant medicine when I was young, in my late teens, and I didn't know anything about preparation or integration, and was having these wildly spiritual experiences
Mm.
and had no way to really ground them, and nobody around to support me. And it was a little bit destabilizing, because if you try to navigate this world on your own, it is pretty challenging, because so many new realms open up. And I heard you mention psychedelics and also the term entheogenics. And sometimes I hear the terms interchangeably, but there really is a difference between the two terms. And you also mentioned that you studied the science aspect of it, and now you're moving into Master of Divinity and more the spiritual side. Can you kind of orient listeners to what the difference in your mind is between psychedelics and entheogenics, and or if there is a difference in your mind?
Sure. So back in the 70s, a group of scholars got together at Harvard and said, you know, people have used substances to enter altered states for at least 12,000 years. Some argue 40, but 10, 12, before agriculture, humans were using plants to alter their states of consciousness. And in many, many, many cultures, that was done in a spiritual context. And these scholars, these religious scholars primarily, got together and said, you know what? We need a name for that. Psychedelics, in this again, like 77 or 79, comes with all this baggage. We think about the anti-war movement. We think about Timothy Leary. We think about recreational use of these, or we might even think about psychedelic assisted therapy, which was being done with alcoholics and other groups at that point. We need another term for spiritual. So they came up with entheogens. These are not psychedelics. They are entheogens when they're used for spiritual purposes. And the idea was specifically to reclaim the word and put the emphasis on spirit as something not recreational, but recreational. And then since then, there then became another group that said, well, then entheology is the theological study of entheogens for spiritual use, which is pretty cool. So I try to use those terms publicly to help distinguish when I'm talking about the medical use of psilocybin or DMT or ibogaine. Those are psychedelics, and ketamine, even technically not a psychedelic, but for this purpose, that's psychedelic assisted therapy. When I think about recreational use, I'm sorry, you're going to a Grateful Dead concert, you're going to a Fish concert, and you're going to have some psychedelics. It's psychedelics, amazing, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that the decrim nature movement is important, and I think the psychedelic assisted therapy and the scholarly work on psychedelics is important, and there needs to be a religious path. And with religions, I use the term entheogens. Danny, there's a an elder friend of mine has really helped me. The numbers, I think, paint a pretty big story here. So I'll share with you here. In all of psychedelic research, clinical trials around the world for 20 years, maybe 5,000 people have had a psychedelic. And then if we look at Oregon, we look at Colorado, once they get up and running, Oregon's maybe 3 years for 20,000 people. And we talk about all this, all the newsletters, and MDMA is going to be legalized, psilocybin, blah, blah, blah. Great, amazing. Yes. And because of bottlenecks and constraint, it'll be about 3 years before they start doing 100,000 people a year.
Mhm.
The RAND report last year said 8 million people in America tried psilocybin, 2 million people tried LSD. And if we subtract for microdosing, 5 million Americans used a psychedelic. We overlay that with the Pew report, with other data that says roughly half of that 5 million people were doing it for spiritual purposes. So by a factor of a lot, psychedelics and entheogens are being used by Americans outside of our existing legal structures. And I just think that's important to understand, to really wrap our heads around when you and I are talking about how do we share information and how do we know amazing things can happen with psychedelics, good things can happen, mediocre things can happen, and bad things can happen and will happen. How do we just adjust those ratios? And for me, I think I can do more good focusing on the spiritual use of psychedelics, which many, many more people are actually doing than the psychedelic assisted therapy world.
Yeah, I love that. And it really speaks to your passion about sharing educational materials for everyone, like your book, Psychedelics for Everyone. You're very clear, not everyone should use psychedelics, but they should be for everyone. And that messaging really comes across in the fact that you're putting out such amazing educational materials, preparation guides, integration guides. Your TED Talk is fantastic. Psychedelics are catalysts, not cures. Can you speak to what you mean by that phrasing, catalysts, not cures?
Yeah, I mean, you and I grew up in this North American Western culture. And we were first told that in our society, the high priests of our society for our age group are doctors. They're not priests. And we are told very young, we can give up our agency to the doctors. The doctors know best. And when something is wrong with us, we are very quick in our country to prescribe. You're feeling blue, prescribe. You're feeling anxious, prescribe. You're feeling, whatever you're feeling, prescribe. And we're going to fix you. Is that the idea with the DSM in many ways is that we are broken and that our doctors can fix us. So we become victims of our own. We're not creative, powerful beasts. We are receiving entities. I talk about psychedelics as catalysts because in my experience, they don't cure anything. They don't fix anything for anyone. What they do is they put us into a state where our inner narrator quiets down, where shame, blame, and guilt are dampened, and where we can remember that we didn't always look at the world the way we have been recently. That there is other ways to look at ourselves and our relationships and our and the universe than how we are today. And when we start remembering that, out comes, oh my gosh, this is a story, and this is a story, and this isn't really a truth. It's a layer that I've added to myself from 50 years of programming. And I can look at that without saying bad me or bad anyone. It just is. And now, with that insight, that awakening, that awareness, that understanding of who I am and why I'm here and where I'm potentially going, I can then choose how do I act in my everyday life. And I can bring that, and that's what integration really is. Integration is the practice of coming into every circumstance, into chopping wood and carrying water, into doing the dishes, into interacting with the family, interacting with the work, with a level of awareness that we were able to touch with the psychedelic. And how do we make that spiritual experience into a spiritual life? That is the practice of how do I bring more awareness into everything I do.
Yeah, I love that. It makes me think of that Jack Kornfield book titled After the Ecstasy, The Laundry. How do you ground these groundbreaking and earth-shattering experiences into reality, into your daily life? And I really align a lot what you're talking about, trusting that inner healer. awakening your heart and remembering that you are whole already and there's nothing inherently broken about you. And yeah, so thank you for spreading that message. I really appreciate that.
And I appreciate you
Um,
seeing. And can I just add one? It's a
yeah,
two
yeah.
part. It's remembering that you're not broken. I'm not broken. We're not broken. We may be acting at a level of awareness that's different a minute ago than it is now. And I needed to have that experience a minute ago to be at this minute. So I would do it differently if I was doing it tomorrow, but I wasn't doing it tomorrow. I was doing it then, and that's what I needed at that moment. Um, yeah, so nothing's broken, and that there's nothing out there, anywhere outside, that's going to make me happy. I'm just going to keep moving the goalpost. So once I know that, and everything that's going to make me happy is inside, that's kind of freeing. Oh, I
Hmm.
don't need the blah 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 or the building with my name on it or the 500 employees or whatever it is that I was chasing. Can I sit by myself quietly for an hour and be content?
Beautiful. Yeah. So, shifting a little bit, your most recent book is specifically for veterans. It's a veteran's guide to psychedelics preparation and integration workbook. As I mentioned in the introduction, there's also an edition of that for coaches and therapists, and that's a great resource. Thank you for putting that out there. I'm wondering what drew you to specifically working with the population of
Mm.
veterans. I know that veterans have the rates of mental health are significantly increased over general population. Um, more veterans have died by suicide since 9/11 than have died in active combat. So there's an active crisis here where veterans need help. I'm wondering if you could talk about your process of wanting to serve that community in particular, especially as a non-veteran yourself.
Mhm. This was one of those circumstances where life just unfolded. So I was speaking somewhere, and I just happened to be talking with a veteran, and I gave him Beyond the Trip, and he was going to Oregon to have a psilocybin experience. And when he was up there, he was talking with the founder of Heroic Hearts, a guy named Jesse Gould. And Jesse's like, "Let me see this book." He's like, "Oh, I know Matt." And so Jesse called me up and said, "Would you be willing to make a version of this book just for veterans?" And then that
Mm,
project spiraled. Here, and I talk about this in my TED Talk, but here's something I didn't realize. So from 9/11 until today, in all combat situations, there have been about 7,000 soldiers who've been killed. In that same time period, 9/11 till today, active duty and veterans, about 30,000 have killed themselves. So it's not just a little bit more, it's 400% more people are killing themselves and dying in combat. And it's not malicious. It's that the most common solution for these veterans who are experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder and depression, anxiety, is to give them antidepressants. When an antidepressant works, great. This isn't about getting rid of antidepressants. It's giving another tool to psychiatrists and psychologists for when the antidepressant doesn't work. And what we've seen with things like MDMA and therapy, people who had, quote, treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress disorder, nothing's worked. None of the talk solutions, none of the pharmacological solutions. They give them 3 sessions of MDMA with therapy before and after, and 71% no longer have a diagnosis of PTSD. That's amazing. And it's frustrating to me that groups like Heroic Hearts Project, Mission Within, Vets, they're sending our veterans to Central America, to South America, some to Oregon now, where they can access legal psychedelics. And it's so expensive. When we have other alternatives for them that seem to be working really well. Is it perfect? No. But phase 3 clinical trials, 2 different trials, the outcomes were better than the amount of people killing themselves every day in America. So I've loved working with Heroic Hearts. They gave me access to their team, and I learned a ton from them. I worked with one of their staff members, a guy named Ken Weingard, PhD, who was at the VA for 20 years. I had the privilege to do a whole program with the vets where I actually did the group therapy or group coaching with them, did individual coaching as if I was in their program. I went to Peru with a group of veterans, did that whole program with them. It was fascinating. And also learning that for so many of our service members, they entered the service already having childhood trauma. And I didn't know that. So I didn't realize, oh, wait a minute, who do we recruit to be in our military? Why do they want to get away from their towns? Oh, and they didn't have the resources to get support when they were younger. And then they went into the military and had additional traumas put on top of them. So it's a long history of trauma for many of these people. And I don't think it's too much to ask that we use every available tool to give them support and stop this epidemic of veteran suicide in this country.
Yeah, wow, I can really hear your heart coming out, and your service is amazing. So you're working primarily with Heroic Hearts journey or Heroic Hearts Project, and I noticed that 100% of the proceeds from that preparation and integration guide go to Heroic Hearts. Is that right?
The one that's out today, 100% goes to Heroic Hearts, and they're so generous. They're letting me partner with Mission Within to do a version for them, and their book will have their proceeds go to them. It's I think we don't all know this, but what I'm trying to do, what they're trying to do, is just get the tools into the hands of people who can use it, can benefit, and we recognize that different people have different audiences. So Heroic Hearts has their lane, Mission Within has theirs, Vets have theirs. How do we help our veterans first make an informed decision? Are you a good candidate? If you are, which medicine are you drawn to? Which psychedelic or entheogen? And how do you want to experience it? Do you want to go into a clinic and have ketamine legal and great? Do you want to go down and work with Shipibo healers in Peru and use ayahuasca? Amazing. Do you want to work with iboga or iboga in Africa or ibogaine in Mexico? Great. Do you want to work with psilocybin mushrooms in Oregon? Great. And then how do you do that? Literally, how do you do it? How do you prepare your home? How do you prepare your body? How do you prepare yourself? But these veterans are strong and they are used to preparing. They are used to getting ready for action. So if we give them the tools and the instructions, they'll follow them. And that's amazing in the front end. And then if they have the support in the back end, it can really be transformative.
Yeah. So I heard you mention what makes somebody a good candidate, and how important the screening process is, especially for veterans, people with complex PTSD. Uh, Can you speak to the importance of screening, and then also how you help people choose what the right medicine is, like
Mm.
what the difference is, why somebody would choose psilocybin versus ibogaine, which can be a pretty
Cardiac
intense
risk. Yeah.
experience. And yeah.
What I talk about with this, Danny, is there is no right or wrong psychedelic or any entheogen. There's only what's right or wrong for you. So, what do you have access to? What do you feel drawn to trying? And in what environment do you want it to experience that? So for some people, they say, I can't do it. I have a job or I have a requirement in my life that I can't do anything illegal. Okay, well that narrows it down immediately. There's 50 ketamine clinics or 50 ketamine clinics in all 50 states. Off you go. And the same cautions though go to you as to everybody else. Meaning, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's done the way you want it done. There are ketamine clinics that believe it's a biochemical reaction. You're going to come in, you're going to stick an IV in your arm, you're going to watch your Netflix, and they're going to send you away because it's biochemical. And there's other providers who believe it's biochemical, psychosocial, spiritual, and they're going to give you a blanket and a playlist and prepare you, and you're going to have a living room environment. Both are legal. And it's up to you as the person who's pursuing this medicine to choose which path is right for you. You can even have at-home ketamine, as you well know. And again, for people who are living in rural areas who don't have a lot of money, that's a way to get access to the medicine. But best practice is to supplement a lot of things around that. It's not that it's wrong; it's just what's missing for you. The same thing is true if you're looking at a psychedelic retreat center. Okay, I can afford to fly to Jamaica, to Central America, to the Netherlands, to Peru. Great. How many people do you want in the room with you? There's some places that have 100. There's some places that have 9. What feels right for you? There's some places that they really do a lot of preparation and integration. There's some that now you're on your own. And again, that's not wrong. If you're like, I've got my integration preparation covered, I don't need theirs. Great. And then in terms of the medicine, I guess I like it when if I could have it any way I want, I like it when people go get their own screening from someone who's not selling them anything. So meaning go to spiritpharmacist.com, Dr. Ben Malcolm. Go to Emily Culpa, Kulpa. Go to the Psychedelic Pharmacist Association and pick one of them and ask them to do a medical intake on you. Why? Well, for a couple $100, they're going to take an intake form. They're going to look at your prescriptions, your supplements, your physical history, your weight, your height, your mental and mental health. And they're going to say back to you, hey, based on what you've told me, here are the risks with A, B, and C. And these have less risks and these have more risks. And they're going to have a very candid discussion. And they're not trying to sell you a seat to anything. They're just giving you good information. Many of us don't have doctors who have that kind of knowledge. That, like Ben Malcolm, he teaches master's level courses in psychedelic pharmacology. He has seen more. I bet you by a large amount, he has seen more people in that psychedelic screening process than anybody in America. And for a couple $100, you can talk to him. It's kind of amazing. 3 days a week. That's all he does is screenings. He also works with groups like groups that I've worked with, where they're bringing him 10 people in a week of screenings. And then he's following up. How did it go with this and that? And what happened with that toe fungus that they were using this weird cream? How did they react to the medicine or did they not react? So I like when people, like, it's part of the ceremony or it's part of the process is coming up with my own voice, my own agency. I'm taking charge of my health. I'm doing something unusual. And now I'm going to talk and get my medical screening. I'm going to decide what feels right for me. And then I'm going to go find the provider to give me what I want to do. Versus I've gone to a retreat center. They've done a screening behind the scenes. We really didn't talk about it. They just said, yeah, you qualify. But were they concerned about anything? Or did they just decided the risk tolerance was good for them? I don't know if I'm making an informed decision of what's right for me if I don't get that information myself. Does that make sense, Danny?
Yeah, totally. And what I'm thinking a lot about is this idea of psychedelic exceptionalism. Like there's so much in the news and culture today about the psychedelic renaissance and how it's a panacea and it can solve so many things. And I mean, and it can do those things, but what you're speaking to and what I'm hearing really strongly and something I'm really striving to practice is proper health screening, proper intake, proper appropriate relationship building with the person you're going to be working with, because that relationship means so much when you're in a session. And just recently I went through the Inner Trek psilocybin facilitator training program in Portland. Amazing school. And I can't say enough good things about them. And at Practicum, we went to the service center in Portland, and I was just amazed at how many layers of safety were embedded into every process and how that allowed me in my session to go very deep. I felt so safe and held, had a great relationship with my facilitator. And I can't say enough about how important that is. And so I'm wondering if you could speak just a little bit about this idea of psychedelic exceptionalism and how people tend to hear something and want to jump to it really quickly.
So when I think about psychedelic exceptionalism, my mind goes in kind of two directions. One is kind of the Carl Hart, where why do we treat psychedelics different than other drugs, and why do we look at people who use psychedelics so differently than we look at people who choose to use other drugs? And I think that for me, that's been a learning curve. So starting really as a non-drug user, and then now going through this whole path of understanding that who am I to tell any other adult what they should put in their body? I don't know what's right for anybody else besides me. And the moment I think I do, I'm effectively trying to control you, which means I'm doing violence upon you. That's not my place at all. So that's one piece of psychedelic exceptional. The second is in the news, we hear about study after study. Oh, look at psilocybin for smoking and for end of life and for depression, for anxiety, for OCD, for eating disorders, for substance use challenges, on and on and on. Why? Well, when we think about breaking repetitive thinking patterns, different scientists have different ends of that chain. I have a thinking pattern that's leading me to overeat. I have a thinking pattern that's leading me to overwork. I have a thinking pattern that's leading me to whatever addiction or challenge. That's just or to experiencing depression over and over and over, anxiety over and over and over. If the psychedelic can break the repetitive thinking pattern, it can help break the end action. So, and I'm going to come full circle here. And it's not that the psychedelic was entered into the body and broke the pattern by itself
Mm.
and then stopped the behavior. It's that the person, through the state that they were in, saw the root of whatever was causing that repetitive thinking pattern and was able to know, not to believe, but to know, I don't need to act this way. I don't need to see it that way. I can feel and see it differently. And I don't need to drink anymore. I don't need to smoke anymore. I don't need to overeat anymore. I don't need to ruminate anymore. And it's kind of beautiful. So it's not the psychedelic that's exceptional. It's the breaking of repetitive thinking patterns, which we just don't have another tool in our culture that does it.
Mm. Yeah, beautifully said. Thank you so much for that. And in just the last few minutes we have, your passion is so strong, and I can
Mm.
feel it. And you've written so many books, and your TED Talk is great. So, what are you looking forward to? What's in the future for you, or what projects are you working on right now?
I love the intersection of psychedelics and spirituality. And really, people ask me like, you're in the psychedelic space." I'm like, not really. I use those medicines, and I work with communities that use those medicines, but I'm really in, how do we have a spiritual life? And psychedelics are just one tool. It's one practice. But I spend many more days not on a psychedelic than on a psychedelic. Um, so there's things that I find really interesting that's happening right now. I think we're seeing, with Christians, Jews, and Muslims, different psychedelic societies are forming and becoming stronger, and they're trying to encourage people who have direct spiritual experiences to return to their faith traditions and those texts with new eyes. And I think that's really beautiful and fascinating, um, and really helps with things like fundamentalism and with understanding, can I take the teachings of Christ and not take the patriarchy and not take the anti-science? Maybe I can, in a way that I didn't think I could. I think that's fascinating. I love, there's some work happening at Emory and at Harvard Divinity around the intersection of chaplains and psychedelics. And I think that's really cool, because chaplains are already trained in, how do I sit with people in pivotal moments of transformation, a lot of end of life. And they're already embedded in our healthcare system, and they're embedded in our insurance system, and they're kind of the lowest paid people in the hospital ladder. Well, if in a medical setting, someone else is actually delivering the medicine, and people just need someone to sit with them as they have a spiritual experience, they're really well equipped to do that. And in my mind, that's easier to train than training therapists on how to understand the time it takes to really understand and embody altered states. So I'm doing some things in that intersection. I think it's just fascinating. I'm super curious to see how this unfolds. And then and then I've just got to finish this doctorate. That's the
Yeah, sure.
that's
It's a lot of work there.
There's a lot of work there. Yeah. What are you working on? What are you most excited about right now?
Very similar things, actually. I've been very intrigued by chaplaincy.
Mm.
I'm really curious about where just the legal framework of many different states who are starting to become really curious about psychedelics goes. Um, and yeah, just continuing to further my education in psychedelics. And also a big part of my heart is in healing with nature, with
Mm.
the earth as sentient being, uh, immersion retreats as a way to integrate psychedelic experiences. So yeah, many different things going on, but
That's really
all
beautiful.
exciting stuff. Yeah.
That is another byproduct of this that I just didn't expect. And I don't think I'm going to say it, but for those who haven't experienced it, they might not even understand it anyhow, because I don't think I would have gotten it. But this idea that understanding that we are all deeply connected, and that I'm not separate and apart from nature. I am nature. Oh, what do you mean I'm nature? I'm nature. And that these
Yeah.
trees and this ground, it's supporting me right now. And I don't need anything to get this oxygen, to get this love, the support from the universe. It's here right now. But I've up until my first psychedelic experience, I saw myself as something separate and apart from nature. I was a human in a natural environment, versus I'm just a wave. I'm just a piece of this. And I love that.
Beautiful.
And having places to go after entheogenic experiences to feel into that. And I'm using that word very intentionally because for someone like me who spent all of my life on my head and in spreadsheets and in things, I didn't understand that feelings was language without words. And I didn't
Mm.
understand how supported I was with this earth. And feeling into all of that has been really, really beautiful for my journey.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that, Matt. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you, and everything you're doing is so inspiring. Just really appreciate the work you're doing and taking the time to be on the Future Reimagined podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing the work you do, my friend.
Yeah, for sure. Have a good one.